We're finally allowed to take a break. After a few hours or so, we were in the living room. By now you're probably noticing it wasn't a very large room, but we managed. The size must have been around the same as the one in the apartment living room. Our home certainly wasn't the largest. Nothing like our parents' old home. It was a small ranch that was placed on the outskirts of the city in a small town. It may be big for our master. 2 boys being raised here full of energy? It could have been vaster. It was perfect for a small starter family, however. A family of 3, however, with a mother and father and 1 kid. Not 1 parent and 2 children who love to run around. In the very least, at least I had a very large backyard that we can run around in. However, even though it wasn't exactly impressive or fancy looking with its brownish exterior, it didn't, and I suppose it didn't matter either, considering that no one would visit us. I took a seat on the maroon wool couch. It was pretty old and it wasn't very large, enough to fit 2 people on it, while a matching chair right beside it. I looked up who was playing a video game while laying on the floor. You can hear his button mashing and the sounds of the video game going. I had blueprints on the coffee table. I was trying to think of a new invention. To me, the possibilities were endless. Who knows what I could create with my own hands in just a matter of weeks. Though sadly, I had no inspiration for a new invention. So until my mind came up with something, I watched my brother play his game. I yawned slightly while stretching. I looked outside. The clouds have overtaken the blue skies and barely any sunshine, making the room dark. It's like all we did was reside in the shadows around here. Every bit of the place was dimmed down to where mostly shadows were shown. Just looking around, thinking of where we are now. We didn't even have any friends like some of the little boys did. Though our master would say that would be for the best, considering who we were now. But I would imagine that would make us antisocial, though our master would still say to us that we would one day understand why it had to be this way, even though we were still both a bit confused. They have to know who we were? Can't we keep just a tiny bit of a secret? A friend or 2 would be nice to have around here. But I guess with training, what time did we even have? I took a sigh and sat back. Though after a few minutes after that notion, Edmund was startled half to death when he saw our master on the TV screen. No! Master, how could you? I was so close to finishing the final levels of my game. I didn't even save. Now I have to start all over.
There are more imperative things in this world than little insignificant games that show no value. More to the point, you 2 must come to my office immediately. There's something I must tell you 2 that is of the utmost
I could hear the urgency in our master's voice, so I knew it must have been something crucial to take seriously. I jumped off the couch right after he said that and nodded. We'll be right there, master. Wait, at least let me save. I'd die if I have to do this again. I rolled my eyes thinking he was being pitiful. I grabbed him by the front of his hair and responded. Oh well, maybe this will teach you to save more often. As I was pulling him away, he tried reaching back for his controller, hoping that he could have at least one slightest chance of at least grabbing it and quick saving. But to no avail, we already had left the living. Wait, just let me, come on! I got Edmund to move as fast as I did. He probably thought it was too late now, and he showed how upset he was. He started to sulk, hoping this would be over so he can return to his game before anything bad happened, even slouching while letting his arms dangle while his eyes were slightly closed to his displease. However, to keep him focused on our objective, I kept his mind on going to our slightly yanking on his hair to get his mind off of it. Let's go and forget about it. My game. When we reached his office door, we entered right away. We would have sat down, but the dimness of the room, well, we couldn't see it very well, or even at all. It was like walking into a room that was always night, that never saw sunlight. Only a few glimmers of tech or window is all we had. I didn't understand how our master could see what he was doing, or even slightly going to grab something without grabbing the wrong item. I noted he must have pretty good eyesight, perhaps even 20/20. It was our first time in his office being called like that. so his office was new to us. We were almost baffled on how we could barely even see our master who was sitting right in front of us at his desk.
Good. Now if you would take a seat. We have a lot to discuss.
But there was one predicament. We couldn't even see the seats. They were slightly in front of our desk, and we were a few inches behind them, ambling slowly even closer. The chairs must have been black plastic or something because they blended in. I looked down in hopes I would find some kind of shine of the chair legs. Unpredictably, they did give off only a slight glimmer, giving me some kind of awareness of where they were placed. I soon banged into the seat. I held on to the back of the chair and sat down leisurely. Careful. As for Edmund, he tripped over himself twice, even tripping trying to sit down. I took a slight sigh, waiting for him to settle himself. Woo! When that was all cleared and done, we looked over at our master to see what he had to tell us. I almost hoped we didn't agitate him for taking so long just trying to sit down. He examined both of us to make sure there was nothing more. He cleared his throat and responded,
Now that you're both present, there is something vital I have to tell you.
He looked at both of us as we pondered what it could be. He took a deep breath in and out, as if he didn't want to tell us what he was about to. But after a moment of collecting himself, trying to ease his own mind of his own worries and agitations of what his orders were,
You two will be given your very first mission.
Awesome! Our very first mission! I've been waiting 5 years for this moment. Now we can do what other spies can do that I've heard of stories about. What is it? When is it? When is it gonna be? He was over-exhilarated at this point. He could barely contain himself as he bounced in his seat. Our master looked as he saw the childish behavior of Edmund, even more so speculating this was an appalling initiative that his master had to come up with.
It will be a week from now, on a Monday. The operation should start around midnight or so, but you must arrive earlier, much prior than when it begins. It is located within the richest part of New York, in one of the affluent and tenable manors in the city. See out Gated Community by Coney Island.
Sweet, I can't wait. Wait, but one of the most... You want us to... One of the most richest and secure places in the city?
Even though this is something rather unanticipated and is surely out of your league, I believe you two can do this. You've trained for 5 years, and it is time to test your skills. Spies do this type of mission all the time, so you should be able to accomplish this.
I rolled my eyes, shaking my head while crossing my arms. I have never heard such a witless and ridiculous statement in my life. Well, so far. Talk about insanity.
Is that so?
Well, isn't it obvious, Master? I understand we are training for 5 years and all, but not too long ago even you said we were mere novices. Surely there must be someone else in the HQ who is highly more capable than we are. Shouldn't we start off with a straightforward task and work our way up to the higher responsibilities? After all, we're still learning the ways of a spy. This stuff just doesn't happen in just a few years. And being one of the richest secured, I've heard about that place. It would be a miracle to even pull that off with just Eminent. You need at least a team of adults working together in cooperation. I heard it's hard to even sneak in, seeing how much they advanced over the years because of the thieves. Even a professional would have a hard... Never mind a bunch of 10-year-olds running in like it's a playground of hide and seek. This is truly ridiculous. After my explanation and reasoning, it was completely silent in the room. It almost gave that discomforted sense, especially since it was already hard to see him as it was, and the stillness itself was reckoning. Just sitting there. I didn't know if he was incensed or not for talking back about what he wanted. Even Edmund didn't grasp what would happen. We both just stared at our master who had his eyes closed, just sitting in the dark, waiting. It almost raised a bit of my own anxiety. I think Edmund felt it as well. He didn't feel like hearing him or I getting scolded, even though we believed it would make sense if we were to wait. At this point, we were just waiting for the moment where he would open his eyes and scold me. I gulped and sat back in my chair. I almost regretted saying it. I put my shoulders up near my head, sitting still. I didn't dare say anything more. Maybe this wasn't a good idea. After a few moments of anticipation, he finally said,
Eddie, I admire your sense of wisdom and insight, especially for a young boy your age. But at this current state of affairs, you have no other choice or option.
But, Master, why?
Because the Peruvian diamond is.
Wait, did you say Peruvian diamond? I've read about that one time while I was in the library. It's supposed to be one of the most rarest diamonds in the world. It contains a type of power enough to power the city for 5 years straight. That's how robust it is. It's one of the most precious and valuable diamonds ever discovered. Heck, you couldn't even put a price. Legend has it they locked it away somewhere to keep it from getting into the wrong hands. I wouldn't have even fathomed that it was here in the city itself. So basically an OP diamond for those who get their hands on it like a video game. Got it. That's all you had to say, bro. You just killed 45 or so seconds of my time. I'm not gonna get back with that explanation. Like we really need it. It's powerful and dangerous. The end. That's the only important thing we needed to know. Yeesh. He looked away unamused. He didn't care for what I had to say, nor even about what was going on for that matter, or the information that was being presented. Even our master shook his head at him while I took a sigh in discontent. Seeing how we were opposite twins, I had to be the one who really cared about this situation. He completely ignored Edmund and looked my way.
Precisely, my son. That is why you must retrieve this valuable gem. Even if you do not realize it, and you may be in obscurity forever, the world depends on you two doing this task. Who knows what a villain could do with such power? The fate of the world is at stake here. And you two are appointed this mission, and cannot back down from it even if...
He looked down and thought for a trace.
Such as I do.
Does this mean we're going to have, like, quadruple training practices or something?
Quite. This is how it's going to be until the day arrives. For today, you may have the rest of the day off.
All right, I'm liking this already. I smiled slightly back, but I knew there was going to be a catch. Our master cleared his throat and continued.
As I was trying to say, then you two will wake up at 3 a.m. every morning to start your training.
3 hours earlier? I'm starting to hate this after all. He then slouched in his chair upset as he sulked from knowing that the extra work was going to be put into this. Our master sighed, trying to finish his sentence.
As I was saying, you will do this day in and day out until Sunday arrives. Then, you will have the rest of the day Sunday to relax, so you will be rested for Monday evening.
I was feeling quite distressed. I gradually looked up to our master asking, "Do you?" Our master looked over at me sternly as I continued. My eyes dropped a bit. Not knowing the outcome of this mission nerved me. Do you really think we're ready for such a mission, master? Our master sighed slightly, saying softly,
I hope so, Eddie. I hope so.
I felt like he was concealing more than just the mission from us. He could simply notice that something else was perturbing him. But I knew he would never tell us in 1,000 years. He always held secrets from us. He was and acted just the way he looked. His whole personality was one big shadow. We could only stare at each other. I could almost feel his disquiet, as if he could feel mine as well. Contemplated, did he really want us to do this? And I can only question why. Why was he making us out of everyone in the agency? Why us? Why not someone who could be more capable of such a thing? What was he keeping from us? All these uncertainties swirled in my head as I could only look at him. I wondered, could he tell what I was thinking? He gave me a look of if he wanted to answer my questions, but something in him, it kept him closed off to us. He then looked back at both of us and said,
That will be all, boys. You are dismissed. Enjoy the rest of your day off.
Edmund and I nodded. He got off his chair, though he tripped in the process and then stumbled out trying to regain his balance at the same time. Whoa! I fell behind him trying to help him in his balance, though before I left, I slowly turned my head and all I could see was the anguish in our master's eye. Now I believe that I didn't deem he alleged we were ready for this. But I tried having faith in our master. He never wronged us. I wanted to have hope. That he knew what he was doing. That this first time he wouldn't bring that kind of harm to us. I would have begged and pleaded for more answers. Especially now that Edmund was gone. But I couldn't force myself to say what I wanted. as if my throat was clogged and it didn't want to say anything. I could only stare one last time at our master before fully leaving the room and closing the door behind me. When I did, the door clicked shut behind me, and I took a bit of a sigh, and I bet our master did as well. Without me knowing, he tipped his hat and looked downward. All these years he wanted to protect us, but now we were going on a grave mission that two little boys shouldn't be going on. For whatever reason, it was... Edmund immediately went back to his video game the minute he was free. He plopped back down and started it up again, thankful that the game was still on the same level and didn't have to go back. He thought with the rest of the day he could straightforwardly beat the game he's been working on. His eyes were glued to the screen and I could only hear button mashing all over again. Whatever he was, or I can hear clashing of weapons and voice acting of the characters jumping or actions that they would make. They were actually pretty old games from a long time ago. About 1,000 years ago that our master bought at a tag sale of all things. Even surprised that they were still in good shape, especially from so long ago. Turns out growing up, our master sort of had a liking for games. But old retro ones, which he gave to Edmund when he figured he was old enough to take good care of them. Old hero games and such, some, what do they call them? Indie games? Nothing of the high-end games there are now. That, and nor did our master at this time wanted Edmund to have such high-end gaming yet. Most these days are even rated MM, which meant mass maturity. Only meant for 16 years or higher to play because of what it can be. Instead of clicking on a controller, you kind of put yourself in the game. It scans your whole body and inserts you into a realm of the... You needed a good amount of money for that. But it would scan your particles to the game inside, and if you, died, it would immediately send you out of the game. Luckily fixing the bugs that would cause people from actually getting killed, but they were still risky since it could still cause mental instability. Well, at least it used to 150 years ago. Nowadays, people at home are still used to it, that they even use it for shopping, vacations if they can't leave too far away, and or talking to friends inside the internet. That you can actually meet and greet anyone you want. Like, there's even something like the mall that a shopping mart did online for people who didn't have time to leave the house or have specific needs or meeting up with people online to shop together. And your purchases would come in a few days later, which is pretty neat. But it was still kind of a public square as authorities called. Risky for young ones to still enter these games and places. So our master wanted Edmund to have these old retro games instead to start with. He knew eventually Edmund would get into those kind of games. Now getting them out, it was probably the bigger pain. I sat back and remembered that back 500 years ago, that there was a major debate about video games and their relevance. Now very back when, just being around 2018 or earlier I believe, right around 1,000 years ago, they really kicked off back then. Making people use them as jobs instead of getting real jobs out there, causing problems and it only got worse as more of the new generation didn't care to have jobs. They wanted to be, what did they call it? Social media stars? Something around those lines. Everyone's dreamed to feel important, to feel loved or something. And as the new generation didn't care, the less things got done. But it caused more than that over the 100 of years after. Most were too lazy. Because of the advancements in technology, humanity was getting too lazy, letting robots do the work since people stopped wanting to work, wanting to dance or game or do things online. So the economy was ruined. I remember that history lesson. In 2500, they were getting worried because people were dying sooner since they barely did anything. I sat back thinking on it. They didn't care for such things as jobs or doing even driving or going out anymore. The new generation took up terrible habits, even more litter and pollution that it caused a global emergency. Too much technology, they said. It made people lazy and people were dying in their early 40s from over obesity. Or those online challenges things, making it become the norm. Then in 2553, they passed a new law that production would slow down. Robots were taken away and people forced back to work. Not even for the economy anymore since the robots took care of all that, but for the health of the people. I looked around. People like our dad became more retro, bringing some things back from 2012. I remember him saying the only reason he's allowed to have such technologies is because he works for a spy agency. That most high corporations were only allowed to have this kind of privilege of authority to own it. Not even the super rich can and nor aren't allowed to have what we have around here, worried if times would go back. But our master made sure that most things were still hands-on. The tech didn't take over the house to a high extent. He'd be able to type on his own keyboard even if it's holographic, since there is a computer that was once invented to insert one's thoughts in. But our dad didn't like that idea. He wanted things to be manual. He was one of those who just wanted less of things and do things himself. But he's all had to usually get used to that again, making things go back to where things were normal 1,000 years ago. Now don't get anything wrong. Games weren't the reason for this to happen. I remember it was because people accepted the lazier life, and then built robots to do the work that they wouldn't. Accepting the lazy lifestyle and not taking up jobs. Till all stopped and people did things for themselves again. I remember our master saying he was happy to be born in a lifetime where living until about 80 was possible again. He always told me he hated that. He loved doing things for himself, and not that Edmund seemed to mind. They may have been older games from so long ago, but he really seems to enjoy what they are. And honestly, I like them too. They had great stories to them. I couldn't believe someone kept them in good condition for 1,000 years. It's better than most storytelling games these days. And honest, I'm sort of glad to live in an era where living longer is back to normal again. Even our master said in a sense, history was in a way repeating itself where around the 1600s to 1800s, they would die of early age because of the lack of technology. And how ironic to him that people now died because of too much. Stopped caring, stopped creating, and let their body. Well, they worked back then, but just didn't have the medicine to take care of themselves. In a way, he's right. History repeated itself again, but with too much. I guess our master between everything. And humanity let that balance shift so much that it killed them early in life. It was no wonder they passed that law to stop that all. I'm glad again to be in a time where that can be gone. Even our master saying welcome to 2012 2.0, that it was back to where it should be. Moderation in everything. Even if tech is still high, but it wasn't at all what it used to be. Though I shook that thought away after a while. Even it was great to take my mind off things. I sighed, still thinking about, unlike Edmund who could make himself comfortable with the idea. As for me, it really got to me. To think we have this responsibility at this age. I even stopped to look at myself in the living room mirror that it hung right near the kitchen doorway. A simple mirror, nothing fancy, made of iron. I just glared at my own reflection on how I looked. Could we possibly do that? That's all I could think of while asking my inner self. Was our master for the first time in fault for making us do this mission? He normally wouldn't let anything bad happen to us, and he made that clear many times before. But this time it seemed like a contradiction. I couldn't wrap my head around it. Why us? Why all of a sudden? How could he put this upon us even knowing the world was at stake? And right after he said that we weren't ready, and then all of a sudden we were? I shook my head and looked downward. A small 10-year-old with a fate of the world on us? Seemed like nothing more than a fantasy at this point. I even wondered, was there a chance of us being killed? I took a shot and shook my head. The whole thing was giving me a headache. It even nerved me not knowing what could happen to us. Let's forget about this. I tried to ease myself, perhaps even trying to find an optimistic notion about all this. Edmund wasn't exactly happy. He had to start off where he last saved, which was near the beginning. Though it wasn't all bad, he had the whole day to finish, and knowing him, that's exactly what he was going. I looked up and I saw Edmund playing his game carefree. I knew if I showed fear of any kind or doubt, I'd worry him just like. I quickly looked up again and tried to clear my head before continuing that thought. But now it was different. Well, slightly. It wasn't just us, it was the world. Well, after a while of silence, he looked up over his shoulder and asked, "Hey, bro." I could tell. You're thinking about that mission, aren't you? You think we'll be, well, you know, successful and whatnot? I couldn't give a valid enough of a response, knowing I didn't even know the answer. Well, yes, I was, and I thought quickly and took a quick sigh, trying to think positively for his sake. Well, who knows? Maybe it will be. Maybe it won't be as hard as we think it is. Normally stress can do that to a person, always making it harder than it normally is. I'm sure everything will work out in the end. Though, don't you find it a bit unfair that we have to do this sort of thing? We're only 10 after all. It's like we're the only agents available in this agency. That's just like a lot about the agency itself. Of course I find it slightly unfair and more so unreasonable, but our master should know what he's doing. I mean, that's what he's called a master for. He must have some faith in us if he's allowing us to do this mission. We just need to be the best we can be when the night arrives. The whole world is counting on us, and if anything goes amiss and we fail, the whole world will be doomed with a new leader, possibly forever. Edmund giggled slightly. Don't you think you're being a little dramatic about this? I looked over and just saw him, sitting there smiling slightly, almost laughing, mocking me of what I just said. How could one not take this seriously? All I did was sit there, giving him this stare, a stare that said, "What do you think?" But I wanted him to take it genuinely as possible. This was our first mission and not just a petty task either. An undertaking that would affect everyone, especially if we were to fail or if anything would happen to us while on the mission itself. How could he not see it that way? He began to rub his arm and slightly as he looked up at me. His smile slowly faded, seeing the look on my face. He paused his game and looked at me while leaning on his arm. Hey, sorry, though all I mean to say is that even if we're not successful, it just proves that we're not ready and I'm sure they'll send someone else to do the job. We're not the only agents alive. But it'll also prove that we'll need even more training. Perhaps this is just a test. Test? Sure, to see if our skills have really improved, and we'll take our job seriously. You've got to admit, it's a cool responsibility, and even the thought that we had jobs as spies and only 10 years old. Heck, even at 5 we were starting out. He slightly agreed. His expression changed as he smiled again slightly, as if ease ran all over him. I wouldn't have waited till at least 12 or something, but he resumed his game. I'm sure our master knows what he's doing. He taught agents before us. I guess we'll just have to prove to him that we're ready. I'm also ready to prove to him that we're not just incapable 10-year-olds. He then got consumed in his game and lost the rest of his thoughts. I just nodded leisurely while I rested my body on the couch. However, even if in a sense ready, in any slight possible way, I didn't want it to be this mission. I slumped in the couch, making the cushions surround every corner of my skin, making me feel its soft exterior. Though I made sure Edmund didn't see me do so. The apprehension on my face stuck out. I made sure he didn't have that chance to even take a glimpse. However, somehow I think he knew I was troubled. We were twins after all, and I believe we shared each other's emotions. I put my arm on the arm of the chair and held my head up with my hand. My eyes slunk slightly. The only noise was the video game and Edmund's controller. Everything else was just silent. No noise, no cars rushing by, no wind hitting against the house. Just in a house with a TV going and a boy's thoughts rummaging and trying to grasp things. I just really wanted to have faith in our master. If there was one thing to know about him, he wouldn't order us to do anything that we weren't ready for, or anything he didn't agree on. He must have thought we were in some way capable of pulling this off if he let us do this task. He believed in us, right?